It's remarkable, really, just how quickly a young man's voice can go from macho to super high soprano when you begin to punch him in the nose. I was in middle school, and I really did not want to fight this guy. But to make matters worse, my friends were behind me, egging me on. Are you gonna let him do that to you? Are you gonna mess with him like that? Are you gonna let him mess with you like that? And I said, you know what? No, I'm not. And I let go with my hands, and as soon as the first punch landed, all that macho sound that he had in his voice disappeared, and he began to scream, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But at that point, I was so far away from being interested in hearing apologies, and I continued to swing until the principal stepped in and broke everything up. By the time things were done, there was blood everywhere. His nose was possibly broken. His nose was possibly broken. And I felt horrible about what had just happened. In that moment, I lost control of myself. In our community for the last few years now, we've seen an increase in violence amongst our young people. In all of my community involvements, I like to feel like I'm doing a good job, but the sad reality is that you cannot do it all. And over the last few years, I've heard stories and experienced even my own self, times where people have been shot here in Ypsilanti and young people have lost their life as a result. There was a young man that was shot in front of our own home in the Sugarbrook neighborhood. And one of the things that I treasure most about my opportunity to work right here at Eastern Michigan University, and even in the work that I've done in the community through Burning Bush Church of God in Christ, is to work with young men and help them understand that there are other ways to manage their emotions, that there are other ways to begin to redirect their anger and make other decisions. I always tell them this: I've been there, I've done that, so I'm trying to keep you from that. I'll give you this advice, then your life, I'll let you run that. The story that I tell them goes like this. I don't remember if I was 14 or if I was 15, but I know that I was old enough to know better. You see, I was in the 9th grade at Freeport High School in Freeport, Illinois, and there was an announcement that came over in the last hour of the day that said that the great former heavyweight boxing champion, Joe Frazier, would be making an appearance at our high school on the next day. And so, being the boxing fan that I am, I was extremely excited about the fact that Joe was going to be there. So I went home and I began to tell my family as we sat around the dinner table, and my brother, doing what brothers do, says, you should ask him what it felt like to get hit so hard by George Foreman that it actually knocked him off his feet. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I got to school the next day, the evil seed that my brother had planted in my head began to grow legs of its own. And as the event came around, I found myself in line thinking, you know what? I'm going to ask him. And so I got closer in the line. I said, yeah, no, this probably isn't a good idea. And then I got a little closer in the line and I said, well, you only live once, right? So as my turn to meet the great Joe Frazier came up, I stuck my hand out and I shook his hand and I said, hey, Joe, want to know, what did it feel like to get hit so hard by George Foreman that it knocked you off your feet? Now listen, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, but there are various points throughout the movie where things begin to move very slow. And in that moment, not only did my life flash before my eyes, but I thought that my life had stopped. Because I saw the reaction on the great Joe Frazier's face. And not only did I see the reaction, but I felt his hand begin to squeeze my hand. And he said in that voice, that is such a distinct voice, he said, what'd you say, son? And I did what any scared freshman in high school would do. I said, my brother wanted to know what it felt like to get hit so hard by George Foreman that it knocked you off your feet. He paused, turned his head and looked at me like there was a whole lot more that he wanted to do. Squeezed my hand a little harder, pushed me away and said, "Gone, son, gone." I backed away very slowly just to make sure that I was clear of the situation. And when I got away, I let go the biggest sigh of relief that I think I've ever released in my life. It was in that moment that I had realized the gravity and the weight of what I had just done. Here was a man who throughout his professional boxing career had been disrespected by many people in the media, had been disrespected by even the people that he fought. And even though he had won world titles, some little punk kid who was a freshman in high school wanted to disrespect him by asking him about one of his most embarrassing moments. But even in that moment, as a trained fighter, with the power, the skill, and the ability to knock me clean out, he redirected all of that anger and all of that energy and told me to simply go on. Because he realized that what he could have done to me was not worth doing it to me. That moment stuck with me. So much so to the point when I was walking in downtown Ann Arbor with my wife and we're holding hands. And a young man looks at us and says, "Dang, girl, I know that ain't your man." Now, I don't know if you're married, but I'm sure you can imagine what it feels like to be disrespected in that manner. I wanted to knock him out, but I said, "You know what? I'm gonna go Joe Frazier on this fool." I stuck my hand out and I said, "Sir, what is your name?" He told me his name. I said, "Awesome. Now you know what?" As I pushed and re-guided him away, "You have a good night." I share this story as I talk with young men because I want them to understand that you do not have to resort to violence, whether it be physical or whether it be going to pick up a gun, because you have a future that is brighter than you can imagine if you can just make the decisions to get past all of this foolishness that you deal with on a regular basis. Even if your friends are egging you on, even if you feel disrespected, you can make the decision to redirect that negative energy and keep going along your path. So as I'm talking with the young men in the Ypsilanti community, I try to always remind them, remember what Joe Frazier taught me.